Welcome back to the Bullpen Podcast, where we hear the stories behind local businesses and get to know the people who lead them. Today, I'm joined by Rob Kress, founder and CEO of Waypost Advisors, a Minnesota-based consulting firm that helps manufacturers improve their supply chains, operations, and overall business performance. Rob brings decades of leadership experience from companies like Dow, Cargill, and Fender, and today he's using that experience to help middle-market businesses solve complex challenges and turn strategy into action. In this episode, we'll talk about Rob's journey from the corporate world to entrepreneurship and what he's learned about building and leading high-performing teams and why great execution can be one of the biggest competitive advantages a business has. Rob, thank you so much for stepping into the bullpen today.
Thanks, Dylan. Great to be here. Really honored to be a part of your show.
What made you want to start Waypost?
You know, I've always had a bit of an entrepreneurial bug my whole life, and you know, it was funny for years and years. I would try to think of like what's a perfect product or what's something I could make, and never had an idea until honestly one day I kind of took a step back and said, "What am I good at?" I'm like, well, I'm kind of good at fixing businesses. And kind of thus the idea of Waypost was born. And from the beginning, we wanted to focus on the middle market because, you know, I worked with a lot of very, very large companies and it treated me very well. You know, but we would work with in my roles, work with a lot of smaller companies, smaller than, you know, the Cargills and the Dow Chemicals of the world. And time again, you know, I would run across situations where they didn't have the same resources, the same expertise, the same knowledge. And so kind of got me thinking that maybe there's an opportunity here to help out those kind of businesses and fill some of those gaps. And turns out there was.
Awesome. And it's kind of nice, I think, because it allows more focused attention and better relationship building as well, more with the middle market.
And one thing I found, you know, in growing Waypost is that the more focused you are, and this is not rocket science, I didn't come up with this, but the more you can niche down and focus, I feel the more successful you could be because, you know, helping people understand exactly what you do and exactly who you serve goes a long way. Because if you talk to somebody and they walk away thinking, wow, nice guy, no idea what that person actually does, that doesn't help you in growing a business.
Absolutely. And I think that kind of leads into our next question. You often talk about execution over theory. Why do you think so many consulting firms struggle to actually create lasting change?
You know, that's an interesting question. I think, you know, so we focus on execution. And so like all of my people come out of industry. And so we've all worked at manufacturers and distributors and, you know, done the job that we're helping with. And I think that's maybe a key point. So, you know, a lot of these other, you know, consulting firms, again, not trying to throw shade. They're just, the reality is sometimes the people have never worked at a manufacturer. And so the ideas might be great. But the challenge is in the execution. And, you know, change is hard for anybody. I don't care what level of it is. I mean, that's people. And so if you're not able to recognize where someone's at when you're starting this change journey, let's call it, it's really hard to get them from point A to point B. Again, this is anybody. This isn't exclusive to middle market, but you know, if you're not able to give somebody practical solutions to help improve their work situation, solve their problem, whatever you want to call it, it's not going to happen. I mean, because you could go out today and, you know, go into Claude and say, how can I solve the solution? And it's going to give you an answer, but it's not going to actually help you A, implement it, or B, it's not really exclusive to your current situation. So, you know, I think you know, a lot of people have advice, but it's the action that's hard. And unless you've kind of been in the trenches, so to speak, sometimes it's really hard to understand what what works and what doesn't.
Gotcha. And then, in your experience, what challenges do these middle market manufacturers face that these larger organizations don't?
I think number one is really resources, right? Like for example, when I was at Cargill, there was an army of supply chain people, an army of finance people, right? And in a good way, because you had all these resources at your disposal, with when you were working within the company. But if you're a $300 million company, you probably don't have that. You have a supply chain team most likely, but it's not 100 people, and you don't have all the expertise and the system knowledge. And it's just the reality of being a middle market business is you don't have access to not just the resources, but also the expertise, because a 20-year director level person out of a Fortune 100 company is really expensive. And it's not something that a middle market company oftentimes can afford to hire full time. But that's why they turn to folks like us, and that we have those people on our team, and we come in for a short period of time. We get your problem done, and then we train their teams, impart that knowledge, and then we go away. And so our clients are left with actually being able to execute that. But yeah, but going back to your question, it's more of we see this a lot too in terms of I'm going to call it challenges, especially middle market companies that have grown quite a bit. We see this all the time where a $400 million company is still operating like they were when they were a $100 million company. And it may not sound, I mean, in the world of business, that doesn't sound like a big difference, but it really is. And so, if you're operating like you were when you were much smaller, the reality is at some point as you're in your growth trajectory, you need to put in additional processes and have additional skills and upgrade your systems potentially, and it really can impede your growth if you're not doing that. And I would say one of the biggest things that we run into is people just they don't know what they don't know. So most people, I believe, are really hardworking and really mean well. But again, it's like me, right? Like if you come to me and say, "Hey, Rob, I want you to, you know, I don't know, help me build a rocket ship," that's a bit. I have no idea how to do that, right? And so I need to go out and find somebody to help with that. And so, while we're not building rocket ships, that's kind of the same analogy.
Gotcha. And since COVID, everyone's become aware of supply chains. From your perspective, what lessons did businesses learn and which ones have they already forgotten?
It's a good question. I think the biggest thing that everybody truly realized is how important supply chains are, and how fragile some of these supply chains can be. It's but at the same time, it's human nature that memories can be short, and so we are. I would say that supply chain is still very front of mind, especially with the tariffs and all the geopolitical and and the issues with the Strait of Hormuz. And so it's still very much front of mind. But like for example, we're seeing some folks still kind of fall back into their old ways with regards to inventory management, either too much or not enough for the right inventory. We're starting to see, again, some people maybe forget some of the lessons of the past, but I would say in general, and this is a good thing. Supply chain is recognized as much more of a strategic lever post COVID, especially in the middle market, than it ever was before. I mean, large companies already knew this, but I feel like it really brought it home for a lot of middle market companies who are still, who have recognized that, hey, this is if I'm going to grow, I have. It's not just about sales; it's about my operations and my supply chain as well.
Waypost embeds directly with clients instead of simply delivering recommendations. Was that always the vision, or did you discover that clients needed more hands on support?
So the vision was always we're going to do the work. We're going to come in and execute, because that's fundamentally what our clients need. Um, I think what I didn't anticipate was just how closely our teams would be working with our clients' teams. I always find this interesting where an engagement will end, and our people will say, okay, okay, client team, it's been great. And you're always going to have a couple people on the client side saying, "Wait a minute, you don't work here? What do you mean? Like you're from the outside?" And which always makes me feel good. And we don't have 20 people descending on a client, because we don't need to, right? We'll send one, two, three people in and get stuff done. But yeah, it's truly, and I think this has been part of what's enabled us to grow since starting it, is that we're working side by side and we're transferring that knowledge, and so we're truly part of the team, which I really like.
How do you balance efficiency with resilience? Companies often want lean operations, but recent years have shown that resilience has real value.
So there's a couple of ways to think about resilience. There's your supply chain resilience, which it's kind of goes back to managing or mitigating your supply chain risk. And a lot of people have recognized that's really important. And so, for example, with all the geopolitical risks, we, everybody is still, well, I mean, this is a broad statement, right? But China is still very much a hub of goods and manufacturing for the U.S. because of the cost. But due to the geopolitical risk, we're seeing a lot of, what's called China plus one. So folks are putting in a secondary source outside of China, to really help mitigate some of that risk should something major happen. But I would also say there's also the resilience within companies of like, okay, how do we get better, and is this going to stick? I think, I think it's really, you have to meet people where they're at. And so what I mean by that is, like, if we show up and say, okay, here's the big plan, and it's 10 steps ahead of where you are today, go. That is going to fail 100% of the time. And so, how we look at it is, everyone likes to say best practices, which everyone gets, and yes, they're important, but there's a road to follow to get to the top of the heap, so to speak. And, if you're starting, it's the crawl, walk, run philosophy, right? I mean, you have to start. So when we meet clients, we start them where they're at, whatever the technology is, their skill set, and the objective is to get incrementally better, and then get better off of that. And so that's how we found how you really build, kind of that resilience with regards to, excellence and improvement, within organizations. And I think that's what a lot of people, again, you go to Claude and it'll give you the perfect end scenario, or you bring, you bring in, some folks who give you the end state. But if there's no path to get there that's actually going to get your people there, then it's all worthless.
Gotcha. And kind of building further upon that, how do you build trust with a skeptical client?
It's a great question. I would say a couple ways. So beyond the references and referrals and things like that, we have fundamentally, when you're meeting somebody, or when we meet somebody, having come from their world, we're able to, pretty rapidly show them, hey, we understand what you're going through. We know how to solve it because we've done that before, and we also take very careful approach to change management and communication. So, for example, when you bring in an outside consultant, oftentimes immediately people go to, am I going to lose my job? Like, what am I doing wrong? And the answer is, no, you're not going to lose your job, and you're not doing anything wrong. It goes back, you just don't know what you don't know. So we're there to help educate and implement and build capabilities. And, kind of once we're able to demonstrate that, we're able to build trust pretty quickly. But really, the initial goes back to, like, we get what people's problems are, and we know their worlds. And so, so when we have that conversation, I think, our clients recognize that, oh yeah, these guys are okay.
And outside of work, you're passionate about fly fishing. Have you found any leadership or business lessons that surprisingly translate from being on the river?
Yeah, that's I do love fly fishing. Honestly, it's so I don't know, maybe like a lot of entrepreneurs, I'm not a patient man. But I have to say, fly fishing, you have to be patient. And it's you know, it's a bit meditative as well, for me anyway. And so, it definitely, as I've been fishing for many years now, it's taught me a lot of skills around patience and, and it's also surprisingly problem solving, right? And you gotta, fish may have little brains, but boy, they're tricky sometimes, and you got to figure out the puzzle. And so that's so between the problem solving and the patience, I feel that it does benefit. And I'm also a big believer in that. You have to have something in your life besides work. Obviously, I have a family, but you have to have something that kind of recharges your battery a little bit too, and that is huge in my opinion, for being more productive at work.
Where's your favorite spot to go fly fishing? And is it in Montana or Washington or where is it?
Well, I can't name specific places, or I won't name specific places, but I will say here in Minnesota, we have amazing fly fishing. Southeast Minnesota, and this is not a secret, is amazing for trout. You have Wisconsin across the border for trout, and here locally, we have some world class smallmouth fishing on the Mississippi, as well as bass and I mean carp. I mean everyone kind of looks down on carp, but they are a blast to catch on any rod. So yeah, there's a ton of opportunities here. Obviously, there's the destination fishing is great, but when I'm taking my kids out and stuff, like Minnesota has so many opportunities.
Interesting. Yeah, thank you for educating me on that because I just assume, yeah, Montana. That's where all I hear about in terms of fly fishing. So
Yeah, a lot here.
yeah,
There's a lot here. Just go on the
yeah,
DNR website and look for trout opportunities in Minnesota, and you will find literally more miles of publicly eased trout stream that you can walk in a lifetime.
all right. Well, we'll wrap it up with this. If we were sitting here 3 years from now, what would have to happen for you to say Waypost has accomplished exactly what you hoped when you founded it?
I would say, I mean, fundamentally, I really want to build a good culture. And so if I look forward ahead, I would, and I think we are going this direction, is having a company where, it's yeah, it's full of people who are highly motivated, A players, whatever you want to call them, but also it's a company that attracts those people, and a great place to work. And then and as we continue to grow, continue to find new ways to bring value to our clients. I would love this. I would love Waypost to go beyond me. And as we look into the future, as we continue to evolve, continue to innovate. When I mean innovate, not just from a offering perspective, but also from a culture perspective, right? More people are coming to us saying, "Hey, I've heard about you guys, and I want to work for you." And I feel we have a really good culture, but there's always ways you can keep on improving your culture.
Awesome. Yeah, I love that answer. Well, Rob, thank you so much for joining me today. I really enjoyed the conversation and I appreciate you taking the time to come on and share your story. And if you enjoyed this episode, be sure to follow the Bullpen Podcast everywhere you listen and share it with someone who you think would enjoy the conversation. Rob, thank you so much again.
Yeah, thank you, Dylan. This was a lot of fun.